What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I'm here to tell you that Logos is, as it stands at the moment, the very best house in Keyforge. But Wossy, how can you make such a bold claim, I hear you cry? Well, we got Chainbound events at the moment. And if we look at the results of Chainbound events, it is quite clear that Logos is the best house. I do not mean that it will be the best house forever. I do not mean that this is some kind of infallible logic which cannot be questioned. What I mean is the only real data we've got to go on at the moment is the fact that we've got Chainbound tournaments and we've got results. And judging by those results, Logos is the best house. What do I mean by that? Well, if we look at the top 5 decks, then the only house which was in all 5 of those is Logos. If we look at the top 6 decks, that is all the decks with 14 and 15 chains, the only house that features in all of them is Logos. And if we look at the top 10, the first page as you filter it by chains, Logos features in 9 out of 10 of the top decks. There was one that didn't have Logos in. Now, don't get me wrong, Shadows is looking pretty good, featured in 8 of them. And Dis is looking quite nice, featured in 7 of them. Depressingly, my boys from Mars are featured in none of them, which makes me really genuinely sad. But at least I can take solace in the fact that neither is Brobnar. So, what makes Logos so good? And as far as I'm concerned, there are kind of 3 things that really make Logos good. And we're going to have a flick through them as we go, give some examples. So first of all, one of the things that Logos is way better than the other houses at is drawing cards. Logos is really, really nice at drawing cards. Now, this didn't actually feature in every deck in the top 10, but one of the things that we see is library access. And let's be clear about this, right? Library access is just phenomenal. It is one of the over-the-top greatest cards in set 1, Call of the Archons, and I'm not bringing you my top 10 from Call of Archons today, although that will be coming later on this week. But let's just say that if library access is not number 1, it ain't going to be far away. It is an action card, and for the remainder of the turn, each time you play another card, you draw a card. That's crazy good draw power, especially with some of the other cards we're going to mention in a moment. We've also got Mother. Now, Mother's really nice because during your draw card step, you refill your hand to 1 additional card. And then, of course, you can have multiples of these in a deck, so if you got 2 or 3 Mother, you can draw 2 or 3 extra cards. And that adds up pretty gosh darned quickly, ladies and gentlemen. That adds up pretty gosh darned quickly. Now, that's not the only draw power we've got, although it is a good way to look at it. We also do see Time Traveler. Now, rares are going to pop up in these top decks a little bit less often. And that's inevitable. That is absolutely inevitable. Because you just don't see as many of them. I've seen a stat somewhere that each rare will pop up in roughly, well, just under 4% of decks. So even if you've got a house like Logos and a really good card like Time Traveler, it's not going to be in every good Logos deck because it can't be because it's a rare. So Time Traveler then. When you play it, you draw 2 cards, and as an action, you can shuffle Time Traveler into your deck. But it always comes packaged with the special rare Help from Future Self. They're a pair, so I have actually seen a triple Time Traveler deck that does exist, where you get free Time Traveler and free Help from Future Self. Now, Time Traveler gives you an Ember bonus when you play it. Help from Future Self gives you an Ember bonus when you play it. So that's pretty gosh darned ridiculous. And when you play Help from Future Self, you get to grab a Time Traveler from your deck or your discard pile and put it in your hand, and then you can immediately play it to get the Ember bonus and draw 2 cards. So every time you play Help from Future Self, 2 Ember, 2 extra cards. That's clearly exceptionally powerful. So, yeah. And I've not gone through every single option here, right? There are plenty of other things we can do, but they are just a couple examples of how we can draw. One more, Quixo the Adventurer. It's got Skirmish, so when you fight with it, it takes no damage in reply. And when you survive a fight, which if you start it you will, you get to draw a card. So frankly, ladies and gentlemen, drawing cards is something that Logos does quite nicely. Another thing that they do is cheat. They cheat extra cards onto the field. And there are two which I'm specifically looking at here, which are not rare cards, which I think really help to put Logos above and beyond some of the other houses. First of all, we've got Phase Shift. Phase Shift is an action card that just says play. You may play one non-Logos card this turn. And what a lot of people don't realise, and maybe all of you watching do, but I've heard from a bunch of people, that doesn't have to be now. So it's not that you play Phase Shift and then you immediately have to play another card. You can play Phase Shift, draw a bunch of cards, and then play a non-Logos card 3, 4, 5 actions later, which is ridiculous. And remember, with library access down, you play Phase Shift, draw a card, play a non-Logos card, draw a card. And then we've got Wild Wormhole. Wild Wormhole has an Ember bonus, and it reads, when you play it, you play the top card of your deck. Now, it doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what house it is, whatever it is, you play it. Now, that can backfire massively. I've got a deck that's got Wild Wormhole and Gateway to This. Now, Gateway to This destroys every creature on the board, while also gaining you free chains. So there is a possibility that you destroy all of your creatures and you've got a better board position, and then you gain free chains, and it's literally a lose-lose. But again, like we saw a moment ago with Phase Shift, if library access is out, you play Wild Wormhole, you draw a card, you play the top card of your deck, you draw a card. And any deck that's got the combination of library access and these cards is good. Probably the best deck I've got has a library access and free Phase Shift, and it doesn't always happen, but there have been turns when I can play all 3 Phase Shift with a library access out, and the amount of cards I'm playing and drawing is just over the top ridiculous, and I get a redonkulous advantage. But the other thing that Logos does really well is archiving. Now, archiving lets you put a card into what's called your archives, and your archives exists basically over to the side, and at the beginning of your turn, you may draw all the cards in your archive or none of them. It's an all or nothing thing. Now, I did a video about Logos archiving, I'll pop a link in the description, but one of the most obvious and easiest and common uses for this is just to put 3 or 4 cards from one house in your archive, and then at some point during the game, you pick up 4 Mars cards, and then all of a sudden you've got an extra 4 cards. So instead of starting your turn with a hand of 6, which you usually will, and maybe 3 of them are Mars, you start with a hand of 10, and 7 of them are Mars, which gives you a significantly better Mars turn than you would otherwise have. So what kind of cards do we see with Logos that do a little bit of archiving here? How about Sloppy Lab Work? Sloppy Lab Work lets you archive a card from your hand. Now, you do unfortunately also need to discard a card from your hand, which is sad. It's not ideal, but, you know, totally works. How about Random Access Archives? Now, here's a weird thing, right? Random Access Archives is a rare, which has also popped up in 2 of the top 5 decks. Which, again, we would expect even the good houses, even the good rares, we expect them to come up less often because of the whole, they're in 4% of decks. Random Access Archives archives the top card of your deck. Now, this can be very dodgy because, of course, you could end up archiving from a bunch of different houses and you don't build up that archive of one house, which can be a little bit annoying, but, you know, it could work quite nicely. We have Novu Archaeologist that allows you to archive a card from your discard pile, which can be exceptionally helpful here. And then we've got Lab Work, which just lets you archive a card from your hand. So there really are a huge amount of archiving options. Now, we've also just got a bunch of other random good stuff. So if you want to stop your opponent forging a key, we've got Effervescent Principle. Each player loses half of their Ember, and incidentally there you have to round down. You gain a chain, unfortunately, but, you know, you might need that, to be honest with you. You might just need to be able to stop your opponent forging a key. And if that's where you are, then you just kind of have to deal with it, if I'm honest with you. You don't really get much of a choice. When you've got to stop your opponent forging, you got to stop them forging. Or Neurosiphon, if your opponent has more Ember than you, steal one and draw a card. Incidentally, also helps you draw a card, which is rather nice. And we've also got a couple of cards here which are really good for cheeky damage. Positron Bolt deals 3 damage to a flank creature, 2 to its neighbour and 1 to its other neighbour, which I like very much indeed. And then we've also got Twin Bolt Emission, which just lets you deal 2 damage to 2 creatures. When I was having a look at Shadows, when I thought I was going to be making Shadows as the best house, whoopsie daisy, I found a lot of overlap in the cards. And I think there's less overlap in logos than there are in some houses. But if you sit and dig through the deck list here, you generally see archiving, drawing cards, and some of these other tricks, whether it's cheeky damage or stopping them forging or whatever. I do also need to give a quick shout out to Reverse Time. This was the other rare which appeared in 2 of the top 5 decks, along with Time Traveler, which we've already talked about, and Random Access Archives, which we've already talked about. Now, Reverse Time is a weird one. It basically swaps your deck and discard pile, which obviously could be really, really useful, or really, really bad, depending on where you are. But if you can play a couple of really good cards and then play this, I mean, let's say for argument's sake, you can play your library access and a couple of phase shift, and you got a really small discard pile, and then you play this, and you draw your library access again and a couple more phase shift, this could go absolutely nuts. Shadows is the house which has been getting all the props lately. But if we look purely at the data as it stands at the moment, the only real data we have, it's quite clear that Logos is the best house. But please remember what I told you at the beginning of the video. It's really early. There haven't been that many Chainbound events, and we're new to all of this. And Logos might not be the best house for a while. But as it stands at the moment, there's a clear 1, 2, 3, and the number 1 is Logos. But ladies and gentlemen, I would very much like to know what you think about Logos. And also, if you'd like me to do a similar video about why Shadows and Dis are doing well at the moment, let me know, and I'm sure I can accommodate. Go nuts in the comment section, but please do remember to be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about games. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.